It's time for another Bible-thumping wingnut Google Hangouting podcast with Matt Slick from carm.org.
And we're live, everybody. Welcome to the
Here's
Bible-thumping
your host,
Can you tell it's been a while? It's Len. I'm hosting my first Google Hangout with Matt Slick and Andrew Rappaport. I think it's the first one in about 5 months, so...
And you got the timing down perfect!
I'm a little out of practice here. Oh, my goodness. Matt Slick, welcome, brother. How are you?
Good. By God's grace, just hanging in there, and been as busy as all get out lately, but, yeah, I'm here.
Praise the Lord. And Andrew Rappaport's with us. Andrew, what's going on, brother?
Doing well, doing well.
Excellent. So what topics do we have on tap tonight?
Well, so we wanted to start. I don't know that we actually have a topic, but what has been heating up, as usual, is Matt Slick. Matt Slick seems to heat things up. I don't know why that is. Just
Because
mentioning
I'm right.
his name. So, Matt, you had a hangout that we did about over 2 hours, I think,
Yeah.
with Alex from, I think he was from the UK, and that has gotten some legs to it. People are arguing that he thoroughly refuted you, which I do kind of find interesting because
No, he didn't.
we have people who don't understand logic that argue that you were refuted. They don't understand the difference between validity and truth.
Right.
And most of the discussion that you and Alex were having were over validity of an argument. So, what I wanted to do, is I'm going to share something. Let's see if we can get this shared. So, here's the thing, Matt. When we talk about your argument, I figured let me make this a little bit easier for folks. Basically, let me put this. How do I put this in presentation mode? Let's see. Come on. There's got to be a way to do this here.
Yeah, I'm not the only one who has technical issues, Andrew Rappaport.
No, there we go. All right. So here's basically the argument you would often make. Either God created the universe, or God did not create the universe.
Right. That's a true dichotomy.
Actually, hold on, because it isn't. And I'm going to show you why. And this is the point Alex was trying to make.
Hold on. Did you see the look on Matt's face when you said actually?
No, it is a true dichotomy. He either did, or it's not the case that he did.
Okay. And so let me go through this, and I'm going to show you. You're right when you word it that way.
Oh, I see what you're doing. I got you.
Okay. So this is what Alex was trying to point out why this is not a true dichotomy. I've underlined a couple things. God created. God did not create. Now, when you look at this, there's actually 4 possibilities, as you see here. You have 2 different things that are being negated with the not. And so the question is, which is this applying to? And this is what Alex was pointing out, that you have God and you have created. And you have not God and you have not created. This is not a true dichotomy because there are, as you can see here, 4 different options the way it's worded. So, is there a way to word this properly? So,
Let's take a look. The statement, either God created the universe or God did not create. So we have on the left here, we have God and not God, but it's not that in the sentence above. It's God and God.
Correct. And so really well, some would argue that this one could be interpreted really as either
Right.
God created or not created the universe. That would be
what they do sometimes is, you'll notice what he was doing too, is rewording what I would say just a little bit in order to say it's not true. So the way to word it, obviously, is it's the case that God created the universe, or it's not the case that God created the universe, for example.
You'd still have the same problem because of, and he's using formal logic when he's explaining it, because here what you have is 4 different options where if we go this way, this would be, and Alex agreed, this would be a logically valid way to state this. This is when we talk about validity, it's whether the argument that is logically correct. It's not saying whether it's true yet. This is just whether the argument is valid. So what do we have? God or not God created the universe. when you do it this way, there's only one option. It's one of the two options. You can't have both. This is a true dichotomy. Okay? And this is the point that Alex was making, and I think Alex was right when he was making this part. And this is the thing for people to realize. This can be worded in a logically valid way. That does not mean that the argument is false. This means this is discussing validity of the argument the way it was phrased. We can now phrase it correct, as Alex had agreed on that hangout. This is a valid statement. Then I asked him about truth, and he said logic is not concerned about truth, which is kind of funny because later in that same podcast he went on to argue for truth. We also saw his we saw in that case he was saying that when I asked him if there is a way to make that case or make the argument you were making, Matt, he said, well, I don't believe it's true, therefore there's no valid way to say it. And what was he doing? He was actually begging the question. He was saying because he doesn't believe it's true, it can't be true. And which is one of the things he ended up saying that he's saying that when we worded it this way, he's saying it's begging the question, but there is no begging the question. We're not assuming a conclusion here. Okay? I mean, it's either God or not God. One or the other would have created the universe. Now, unless they want to argue the universe wasn't created, and then we could discuss that specific word. But if you want to argue the universe wasn't created, that would be that the not God created, because it wouldn't be a creation. So, want to play a clip though, because I'm sure you haven't. Let's see. First, actually, before we play the clip, I got to give this. Matt, you're going to be familiar with this. This is the definition of a straw man. I want to put this up because it seems that our PhD in philosophy may not understand what the definition of a straw man is. So, got this from a site. A straw man is committed when a person simply ignores the person's actual position, substitutes a distorted, exaggerated, or misrepresented version of that position. This sort of reasoning follows, and he gives an example. So person A has position X, person B presents position Y, which is a distortion of X, then person B attacks position Y. Therefore, X is false, incorrect, and flawed, but the reality is X was never addressed. So does our friend, Mr. Alex, commit this fallacy? Well, I want to play about 2 minutes of him on the magic sandwich, and then I'm going to provide his actual quotes. So this is Alex. If you're watching, Alex is the guy in the lower left. You're going to see a highlight around him. So let's give a listen to what Alex says.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Can you hear that, by the way?
Well, let's start.
Barely. Not well enough.
Let me.
With the transcendental argument, because this is what presuppositionalists approach. This is their distinctive argument. I mean, they have a kind of style, which is to just, it's supposed to be that you never give any ground in your discussion with the atheist. That there's no neutral fact upon which you can agree. The line is that everybody's arguing from their own set of presuppositions. It's as if everyone's sort of on their own remote desert island, sort of looking across the sea at one another, and they can never really there's no shared ground that they can both stand upon. Now, that in itself is a claim which has to be agreed upon for the presuppositional approach to be put out there in the first place. So it's already, it seems to me, there's some kind of bait and switch between saying, well, there's this middle ground, which is the fact that there is no middle ground. And once you will agree with me on that, now we're setting us up so that we're completely opposed to one another, and we can't agree on any particular matter of fact. It just seems to me that that's already just wrong. I mean, an atheist and a theist agree on all sorts of things, like what time of day it is, what color it is that allows the traffic to move through the traffic lights, whatever. There's all sorts of neutral facts that we shouldn't see as being completely obliterated in this sort of interpretational wilderness that they want to put it in. But anyway.
Okay, so he says that presuppositionalism is the argument that we don't accept anything whatsoever, not even what time it is. Okay, so I
thought he did say we can agree on what time it is.
No, he said we can't agree, we can't give ground even on that, and he was saying that we do. He's saying that presuppositionalists say we can't even agree on that. He's saying, but there are things that we can agree on.
Okay.
So you're saying presuppositionalist, you disagree with him?
Well, as a presuppositionalist, in fact, I told him this is a straw man argument, and he tried to prove it. So what he did to prove it was give me a bunch of quotes from Van Til and Bahnsen. And if you look at the quotes, these are his quotes. This was beautiful. I said, read what you gave me. And this proves your straw man argument, because presuppositionalists do not say that we can't give in ground on anything. It is the source of knowledge. And so what I did to make it easier is I highlighted there the first quote: if we claim that we are independent in our knowledge and think we can do it without God, the issue is knowledge. In his second quote from Van Til in The Defense of Faith, he says, it will be quite impossible to find a common area of knowledge between believers and unbelievers. He's not saying we can't have common ground on anything. It's the common ground is specific to the area of knowledge and our ability to reason. You see in the next quote, and this one is from Bahnsen, but Van Til called for faithfulness to the Lordship of Christ in our thinking. Thus, our ultimate presuppositions must regulate every phase of reasoning, including our argumentation. And then later he says that it makes intelligibility their claim to knowledge. That's the issue the presuppositionalists make. And so this is, what did he do? He did a straw man. Someone with a PhD in logic should be able to recognize a clear straw man argument when these are his quotes. This is what he sent me on Facebook. You see in the fourth one that he provided, it says, while in one sense Christians and non-Christians have all things in common, there's another sense which they do not have in common. So even there, that's a quote from Van Til. Van Til saying there are areas we can agree with unbelievers and there's areas we don't. And the last one I just highlighted, where he's saying it's the issues of God's existence and character. And so this is the thing that I just wanted to point out. And say, he's been running around arguing, Matt, that you've been refuted.
You've been saying that afterwards?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And not only him, but others are saying it. And it's not only is it not true, because that's not what ended up happening, but here's the thing: if folks want to, because one person argued that there's no way we can correct him because he's got a PhD in this subject. Well, I'm sorry, but if he has a PhD in this subject and he can't recognize something as simple as a straw man, well, if he can't do that, then let me just show one more thing. Here you go. I'll take it from James White. Please allow me to burn that straw man.
Good.
Yeah. No better way to say it than James White.
So what he did, and let me get this straight, he goes in, he argues, what I remember was arguing a phraseology. That's all the whole thing was, how a certain phrase was stated. And he did agree that that there's a true dichotomy. There's ways to say it. And what he was trying to do was just be uber technical. So let me put this in here, in the paste. It is the case that God created the universe, or it is not the case that God created the universe. That's a true dichotomy, because there is no third option.
Well, and this is where he was.
He was Ben. He was drunk too.
Yeah, okay. I think we on the magic sandwich as well. But here's the thing: the reason he was bringing this up is it's where you have the or statement, because there's several different things that could be negated in that, and that's the reason why when I was real specific with him, because I knew, and I said, is it logically valid to say God or not God created the universe? There is no other option in that. There's only two. It's either God or not God. The issue when you add the other phrases, what he was trying to say, and why that becomes a false dichotomy is because it's not that there's no other options in the God. You're focusing in on the God part of it. It's either God or not God. He's focusing on that it's God, it's created, it's universe, or none of those three. So the way you phrased it, it is the case that God created the universe, or it is not the case that God created the universe. The way he's saying is that you have multiple things there that are being negated, and that's why it becomes a false dichotomy. That's why when you word it as God or not God created the universe, he said yes. He admitted at that point that's a true dichotomy.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what he's saying.
Yeah.
So God or not God created the universe.
Correct.
The way he would word it. Not, it's the case that God created the universe, and it's also not the case that God created the universe.
Correct.
Right.
And so the issue where that helps out.
I'll still go with my way.
Well, here's the thing: for the average person, okay, that you talk to, it makes more sense. It's saying either God created the universe or God didn't create the universe. We understand that.
That's what. Yeah, that's why.
And most people can comprehend that. When you say God or not God created the universe, it doesn't sound right. and it
yeah.
But it's logically valid, and that's when I said, okay, now is it true? Now that's a different question that you have to answer with logic. You first answer the validity, then truth.
Right. So he's talking on a different level than I am. He's talking about the linguistic structure, and I'm talking about the argument. And see, if I remember correctly, he said I think he agreed my argument wasn't refuted.
He both agreed and disagreed. And later on he disagreed, and he gave, the thing is, he gave his confirmation bias when I asked him, because at one point I said, is there a way to better word Matt's argument? And he said, and this is begging the question because he started with his conclusion. He said, I don't believe God exists, therefore there is no way to word it.
He said that. And
that's begging the question. So if we're going to sit here and say, well, he can't be wrong because he's a PhD in it, well, here are two very clear, very simple to understand logical fallacies, and he broke both of them. If he's got the PhD, he should be able to recognize that.
Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have discussions with Christians if he's been drinking. Which I think is kind of interesting, because if the atheists are going to side with him and raise him up as a hero, then what they're saying is that a drunk atheist with a PhD is who they got to go to. He needs to be clear-headed, and he needs to really have a discussion on this. And I would be glad to have another discussion with him on it. But the phraseology, Greg Bahnsen himself in the Great Debate with Gordon Stein would use this phraseology himself. And he understood, they understood, even the atheist guy understood. For, what's his name, the analytical philosopher?
Alex.
For Alex to come in, and then what he's doing is kind of a bait and switch. Well, not necessarily a bait and switch. He's switching, moving the goalpost a little bit. He knows what I'm saying, and he knows that it's true. But what he's doing is saying the wording isn't the right way, and then by saying, here's the wording how it's supposed to be, he's still saying what I'm saying, just in a different word. And then he says, come out and says, oh, the arguments have been refuted? No, it's not been refuted.
Yeah, I think the issue that he was trying to refute, and this is the thing, I think that the goalpost changed because he changed the issue of what's being refuted. The issue that he wanted to discuss is whether it was a true dichotomy.
Right.
And in there, he has a valid point. It was the way you worded it, in its formal sense, is a
in a
false
formal
dichotomy.
sense. Right.
In a formal sense. And that is why we went through and we gave a proper, valid dichotomy that's a true dichotomy. Now, with that, okay, the issue then became where we got into, okay, we got it to where it's valid and it's a true dichotomy. That was the actual thing he was trying to refute. Then after we got past that, we started getting into the truthfulness of it, and he actually was arguing that a true dichotomy, that it's begging the question. And it's not begging the question, because if you don't believe that God created the universe, then if you're an atheist, then not God created the universe. The universe wasn't created.
And you're begging the question yourself.
Well, no, you wouldn't.
Everybody begs the question.
Well, you're not in the sense where if you're looking at this, okay, as a logical statement, okay, it's not begging the question. It's a valid statement. Now, if you're begging the question, if you're going to draw the conclusion and then let your conclusion answer it.
Yes.
So
in this particular, but everybody does beg the question ultimately anyway. It's the worldview that can make sense of the assumptions that we start with. But yeah.
So that's what we wanted to start off with, Mr. Len.
Good job, Ben.
And,
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of clean up some of the confusion that people had with that and what the actual issue we were discussing. And now let's have an open forum.
You know what? I've got a little observation to make a little bit out of it. In that, the atheists will come on and they'll say they lack belief in God. They lack belief, they lack belief, they lack belief. And let's just say that they find somebody who they think is a refuted tag. Then what do? They rejoice, have a little party, and promote it. Now, is that what you do if you lack belief in God? Or is that what you do if you believe no God exists and you want someone to validate your position?
Well, actually, you know, someone who has been on here, you've spoken to him in the past on some of the after shows, Matt, is Jason Mullet, and he has a podcast called the Logical Belief Ministries, and he did a great job on the issue of can a professing atheist say that they lack belief in God? And he did a great job of exposing that if you think about this, they're saying that they lack a belief, but that is actually a belief. Their belief is that they lack belief, but you can't lack belief in something.
Right.
Because to lack belief means to not know about it. You can't have a lack of belief in something that you already have a belief structure on.
Why don't we
did a great job of explaining it.
Dialogue. I want to move someone to the front of the line here, just on the basis of his name, Bozo the Skeptical Hermit Crab. This is proof that the last shall be first. So he was the last one in, and on the basis of his name alone, I'm going to show him in the broadcast, unmute his microphone, and actually, Bozo, you're going to have to unmute your own microphone, and you can engage Matt Slick.
Well, he doesn't have a microphone?
He doesn't have a microphone.
You can type it out then.
Oh, that's too bad.
And I will say that anyone that's in the live hangout that's here without a question, or maybe I'd have to say without a microphone, that can't actually get in and talk, might want to leave. Although Bozo, and I'm not insulting you by calling you Bozo, because that's what your name is. If you want to type it out, maybe we can engage with you while you're typing, and we'll dance and sing a song. No, wait, we wouldn't want to see that while you're typing.
You know, while we're waiting for Bozo to type out his question, I just wanted to add to your previous conversation that, you know, it's funny. It seems to me everyone who's been on this show and engaged with Matt Slick, they all claim to have refuted Matt Slick. I refuted him. It's silly. The Monday morning quarterbacking that happens after an atheist gets his tail handed to him in these hangouts, and then you see them making YouTube videos and having 6-hour Google Hangouts patting themselves on the back about what a great job they did refuting Matt Slick. But it's pretty rare that they come back here and actually engage. So
well, okay. So in the case with Alex, we do want to be fair, because Alex was not trying to that was a where both he and Matt had agreed. He was coming in, he had a degree, he was trying to explain something that he had seen, and it was interesting that Tim had brought up, because the article that Alex wrote actually agreed with Matt's first 2 points, and he was originally going to go through that article, and all he did was jump to the point of disagreement, but his article has a different take as well. But he wasn't coming in to try to debate with Matt. He was coming in to try to correct something he thought that Matt in formal logic needed correction. So.
All right. Well, I don't
not refute the argument.
I was just saying I've seen it with not just him, but with several other atheists, even J.D. Kane, for example. But anyhow, Bozo, I am going to I'm going to let you go here. I'm going to eject you, not because we don't like you, but because we want to make room and you don't have a question. And let's see, Brian, I'm going to show you in the broadcast. You can unmute your microphone and ask Matt Slick your question or engage with him how you like. Brian. Brian, are you there? There he is.
Yeah, I'm just if you view it without
Brian, if you have some earbuds, Brian, and could put those in, we're getting a lot of echo from you. That usually is caused by when for folks there's just, I guess, Google Hangout etiquette while he gets some earbuds. If you have your speaker and you're playing it through with your microphone, typically the typical mics don't have the ability to filter that out, so what you get is a lot of feedback and you get lots of echo. So hopefully, Brian, you can put some headphones on and cut that out. All
right. Well, since we'll
Hogtie's here.
All right. Well, let's get Ben in. Ben is kind of popping in and out, so I'm going to show Ben Carson in the chat. He's got a lot to say on the comment feed. Let's see if he would like to engage Matt Slick live here. So Ben, go ahead, unmute your microphone and engage with Matt Slick. What is the deal? There he is. All right.
I mean, I don't want to waste your time because it sounds like you just want to avoid the subject, but I don't think you guys understood Alex's point.
What do you mean we want to avoid the subject? We just spent a half hour talking about it in chat.
It was all very hand-wavy.
What do you mean we want to avoid it? I just introduced you so you could engage in it, so engage.
Okay, so like you understand that the argument is trivial if it's a true dichotomy in your disjunctive syllogism, right?
Trivial.
Trivial. It's pointless. There's no reason for that argument.
There's no reason to say God either created the universe or it's not the case to create the universe.
Hold on. Ben, you're begging the question.
No. So disjunctive syllogism with a true dichotomy is the first premise. It doesn't get you anywhere. It ultimately leads to P, therefore P. Do we agree on that?
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you intend.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this was the entirety of what he was bringing up.
Yeah, but I'm being wary because you've come in, so to speak, swinging, and then you're saying a certain sentence a certain way, so I'm being cautious.
Okay. Well, I think these terms are like very clearly defined in logic. So, if you want,
let me ask you a question. Is it the case that God created the universe, or is it not the case that God created the universe?
What's my belief on that?
Well, is it logically true that those are the options? He did or he didn't, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so would you agree that if one of them is negated, that the other one has to be the case?
Well, it is the case if one is negated.
Then it has to be that the other is validated. If one of the only two options is invalidated, the other one is validated.
If you've invalidated, well, no, if you've invalidated one, the other one is validated. Like there's no reason for the disjunctive syllogism.
By default, if one is negated, the other one is true by default.
It already is. You don't need an extra argument in there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. So if the atheistic position can be demonstrated that it cannot account for the creation of the universe, the existence of the universe, well then atheism is invalidated. And theism is validated.
Not atheism.
The non-God position.
It's not the non-God position.
Sure it is.
Oh. No, you're mixing it up again.
No, wait. Is atheism God or not God?
No, you've given the logical dichotomy that it is the case that God created the universe, or it is not the case. It's not prove that atheism can't create the universe. You have to prove that it's not the case.
Well, then it's not the case that God created the universe would be the atheistic position. You'd say, no, God didn't do it. There is no God. Or they deny God, or they lack God. It's that position. You say, it wasn't God that did it, something else did it besides God. That would be your position.
Okay, so no, you're mixing it up again. You're going to not God created the universe. It's not the case that God created the universe.
It doesn't mean that there's the only option is God. If there's not God, but the universe exists, then something besides God brought the universe into existence. Either the universe did it itself, or time, or whatever, or UFOs, or whatever it might be that you want to categorize.
It's one thing, or it's everything else.
Yeah, we're just saying
created the universe.
God created the universe, or it's not the case that God created the universe. If it's not the case, then something else, right? But as an atheist, you wouldn't affirm that it's God. That's what atheism is. It's a negation of God.
Okay, so I think you're missing where the brackets are in this.
No, I think you are, dude. I think you are completely, like, this is so simple.
So simple.
Every atheist who comes in here, whenever I hear this...
It is so simple, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
I'm sorry, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? Okay, so it's real simple. It's God, or it's God, or it's anything else.
No. Okay, so if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
God, or
that's not trivial. That's just a false dichotomy.
Anything else would be not God.
Oh, man.
All right.
This is what they have to do now. I mean, come on. They get to argue how a couple of words are arranged.
Okay, well,
That's what they're going to argue about.
If we can, let's add Hogtie. Hogtie was in the Magic Sandwich Show, and if you could add him, I'll tell you why I would like us to add him if possible. Because, you know, we want to publicly apologize to Hogtie for what we had done.
The victim.
You gotta share, Len. You gotta add him to broadcast. What you did was you presented him. You presented him.
Sorry. There we go.
There we go. Well, he's still being presented, but so Hogtie, let me publicly. You caught on very quickly to what we were doing when we were doing the Dillahunty Dodge that week, and you were trying to have a good, legitimate discussion as we usually do, and you caught on to what we were doing, and Tim's like, Hogtie, maybe tonight's not the day, and you're like, I figured out what you're doing.
Let's be honest. I 80 to 90% caught on. I got to be honest. I didn't really get the whole thing, and I know when Tim had said, well, maybe tonight is not the night for you to discuss this. There was that sort of thing, like, because I've known Tim for a long time. Like, I thought he's trying to tell me something, but it just wasn't getting through. And then I got kicked, and I immediately sent him a message on Skype that was like, "What is up with that?" And I wasn't angry.
My favorite part was Tim said, "I'm not going to let you talk down about other atheists in this hangout."
But that confused me.
That was the reason he kicked you, and that was people. There were people I saw on Facebook that were on the Bible Thumping Wingnut Facebook page that were quoting that line from Tim to you, going, "That was just classic. I'm not going to let you bash other atheists on my program." Yeah. And it was really because you were going to let the cat out of the bag, whether you were only 80% or not. But you caught on and I think that's because you've had enough interactions with us. You know that we don't dodge issues. We don't try to play that game.
It wasn't out of character. It certainly was out of character. I will say that the part I didn't catch on about, and where I kind of smacked myself in the forehead afterwards, was when you guys revealed that it wasn't just specifically about bad atheist arguments, but it was specifically raising what you call the Dillahunty Dodge. And I fed you a bit of material, I got to admit, that you were able to say, because especially when I went, "Oh, that's a terrible argument," you guys absolutely capitalized on it. I went, "Oh, dear,
So for folks who don't know, we did what's called a Dillahunty Dodge. We asked for evidence for evolution, and the first guy that came in, I believe, was Gary, and he gave this definition of evolution that was just so broad that it kind of captured everything. And Hogtie was listening. Actually, if I remember correctly, you were like mowing your lawn or something, and you came in because you wanted to correct it. And I said, "Well, hey, atheism can't be true because you guys can't even come up with a same definition." And the best line was you turned and said, "Really? That's it? then Christianity's over. And I was like, oh, done. I was like, that was just so perfect because it was like, that's the whole point. I mean, it was like, you made it so well for us without realizing, and then but you caught on because you knew we were acting a little out of character. And so publicly, I'm glad you came back in so we could discuss. I ask your forgiveness for.
It's okay. I will say I messaged Tim on Skype privately right away, and not to sort of reveal private stuff, but it's pretty obvious what he said. I asked him, like, what was that about? And it was literally, what was that about? Can you explain yourself to me, because that was so confusing? And he was quite prompt to apologize and say, look, you'll understand in a second, don't worry about it. And then when I saw it, my response to it was, okay, that was pretty funny. No hard feelings.
Yeah. We kind of thought that you would find it funny. You would recognize what we were doing, and if you listen to the podcast, we explain it right up front so people know. And I think if you understand it up front, you know what's happening. Although when you watch it live, it was a little frustrating. So you were on. I don't know if this is why you came in, but you were on the Magic Sandwich Show with Alex. I didn't know if that's why you came in, or if you had anything else, or if you wanted to finish that other discussion we never really had.
Oh, we have a couple unfinished ones. So actually, let me say, on anticipation that I'm going to get kicked again, which is about 3 out of 4 times I'm on, I get kicked. Can I, what's it called, when you promote a thing, shout out, whatever it's called. Tim and I are talking about doing a hangout where we discuss flat Earth issues and how it sort of affects the people's impression of Christianity. And I know I heard Matt Slick a while ago sort of express some interest in, like, what is going on with this flat Earth stuff? I don't think it's really that well tied to Christianity, so let's not get into it here. But we'll do that hangout on my channel at another time, so we don't have to get into it here. No, I had wanted to talk a bit about this argument. I do hear some celebration going on, some of it sort of beyond the scope of what's merited by what happened. So Andrew, you make reference to Alex Malpass that actually joined us on the Magic Sandwich Show 2 weeks ago, where we discussed this argument and several other arguments that are put forward. Let me get one position out of the way here right away. One of the phrases I heard right after that appearance was, well, the tag has been refuted. And I went, well, no, that was not at all the point of his appearance, and I don't think that the specific discussion really addressed any transcendental argument. He was specifically talking about the structure of this phrasing of this argument. And so I think it would be wildly premature to say, well, this defeats tag. My interpretation of what I've heard Matt Slick say about this stuff is that the transcendental argument for God is embedded within this argumental structure. Embedded within but unstated. And then around that we have these expressions, P or not P, or God or not God, and then the negation of one of those terms, and then the conclusion. And in my view, the transcendental argument is embedded within it and unstated. And I think what Alex was trying to express to you is that all those other steps, the whole disjunctive syllogism as a structure, is chaff around the argument. So I don't want to start lecturing at this point. That's sort of my overview statement. In my view, the transcendental argument is embedded within there, but not stated. And what Alex was addressing was the use of the disjunctive syllogism when you have a dichotomy as the first premise. He said you were checkmated when you do something like that. Does that?
I think that's more directed to you, Matt.
Yeah, that was what I understood. It was only the phraseology. That's all it was. The whole argument is not defeated.
Yeah.
And it's not. And that was all I got. I go, oh, I get what you're saying is this, this, and that. But unfortunately, I had to go speak. I had to do it. I'm trying to remember the chronology of events, but I had to do a debate in Houston. I had to teach on Islam in Salt Lake City. My wife's brother died unexpectedly, and I just didn't have any time to review anything. And so I've been out of sorts a little bit and just been trying to remember. So that's it. I mean, that's I was going to do some review, but I just never had the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think, these things sometimes take time to kind of digest, and yet I think when people come in, like the last fellow I know was just saying, look, if you've got a disjunctive syllogism with a dichotomy as the first premise, you're done. You get that, don't you? Well, that's a lot of jargon from the field of logic.
Right.
But the thing is, I would encourage you to just accept that as true. that if you're going to structure any argument, it doesn't matter what you're arguing for, whether it's God or not God, or he went on to toast or not toast for some time. If your argument is going to be P, if premise one is P or not P, and your second premise is not P, or the negation of the other. Sorry, let's do it.
Right,
that's where you have the two options. Let's go with the not P. So if your first premise is P or not P, and your second premise is not P, and then your conclusion is therefore P, that's a technically valid syllogistic structure, but trivially so. And Alex had said a couple of times, look, I could get a chalkboard and show you, like, work out the math for you. That if that's your structure, that 1, 2, and 3, it literally reduces to P, therefore P.
Right,
and you just have to accept that that's the case.
Right, and that was a problem we're having. And part of the thing is that, and I have to go study this stuff, but not P is itself a position. And he was saying not P.
Well, that's because his understanding is that that's what your second claim is. And actually, there's one thing. There's one point that I wish I was thinking. I wish he would have said this, but on re-listening to it, I found he did say it once, and I wish he'd hammered it. And that is the idea of the begging the question or begging the question fallacy is. We need a good operational definition for it. I think everybody knows what it is. If I ask the room here, well, hey, do you know what begging the question means? Well, of course, everybody knows. We use that phrase. But in propositional logic or syntactic logic, the formal definition of it would be if, okay, let's say she's in a good mood, which is good. I was going to say the whole point of having an argument where you have premise 1, premise 2, up to premise 7 or whatever, and then conclusions that follow from that. The point of that is that there's some sort of logical calculus or operations you can do from your set of premises to generate a set of conclusions. And it might only be one conclusion, or there may be multiple, but it's to say, well, I have a set of things here, and then the magic happens, the logic magic happens, and then you get your conclusions. But in the case where your conclusion can be derived from one of your premises without support of the other, that is a begging the question fallacy. So in this case, if your structure is P or not P, and then your second premise is not P, and your conclusion is P, well, you don't need the first premise, because your second premise is not P, which is P. Yeah. Right.
But the way I'm looking at it is it's different than that. Let me put it in the text, because. And this is probably, see, what the analytical philosophers, what they're trying to do now is come in and say, here's a technical way of saying this, and then they're arguing about a technicality. But and I think you understand what it is I'm trying to get at, and what the argument is. Now, whether or not it's technically presented on that level is different. But see, it's either P is true or it is not P is true. So P is true or P is not true. I'm trying to word it properly. So what I'm saying I understand. It's as simple as this. God created the universe, or it's not the case that he created the universe.
Okay.
I don't see problems with this.
Okay, well, where the problem is in the definition of that proposition P. Is it, and this is one of the things they sort of teach right in your very first logic course, is to make sure that when you are going to use a single letter to stand for an entire proposition, right, that you need to write out what that proposition is and stick with it. Okay. Because otherwise there are a lot of problems that emerge. So for example, we'll say offhandedly, well, God or not God. Well, do we mean God exists or God does not exist, or it is not the case that God exists? Moments ago you said, well, God created the universe, or not God created the universe, not, and then in brackets, God created the universe. Right. One of those two things must be true. You need to pick a phrasing of it and hold your ground, stick with that particular phrasing. You see, the reason why I think people are kind of making hay out of this disjunctive syllogism as not being a proper approach to it is because you understand that as soon as you say, well, look, I have a proof of God's existence, you come up with that phrasing for your proposition P. And your challenge then is to prove P to be true. And there's any number of tools you could bring to bear that would be able to do that. Again, you'd argue over whether the premises are true and whatnot, but there's any number of tools you could bring to bear to do that. But the problem is when you use a disjunctive syllogism with that dichotomy as the first premise, is that it results in that you're arguing P, therefore P, which puts upon you the challenge now to prove P. So it makes no advancement. And that's the technical criticism that people are bringing up. Now, when you say, Matt, and I agree with you when you say, like, I kind of get what you're getting at, because I've heard many phrasings of the transcendental argument. It basically goes in the form of that if there the general phrasing is kind of like there's some transcendental thing, and it varies, like whether it's objective morals or whether it's math or it's laws of logic or whatever example you want to use. We say there's some transcendental thing out there, and the existence of God provides an account for that, but the not God category doesn't provide an explanation for that.
Right.
And right. So that's why I'm saying, I mean, when I hear your argument, what I hear you say is, P or not P. Premise 1, P or not P. And then premise 2, it's not P. And then asterisk footnote, here's where your full argument is. You then argue towards not P.
Yeah, I think there's
a equivocation
going on. Yeah, I suspect there's a equivocation going on in the not P. Because not P is itself a phrase. It's not the case that P, or that proposition. And then we say not the case that that proposition we say it's not true, that proposition is not true. That's different than saying not, which is double negative, which is a positive. And we were actually talking about this very thing. And I'm thinking, and I'm suspecting that there's a problem here of clarification and equivocation, because it's not a double negative issue. It's not the proposition. And I think there's a problem here. Not P is not the same thing. What I'm saying is not the statement. So it's either God, for example, and I'm not going to argue the Christian God, but God created the universe, or God did not create the universe. How can there be any other options? And if you're only going to have those two options, and one's negated, the other one has to be true.
Sure, and I would accept, and I think most people who, if they want to argue it with in propositional logic, classical logic, would accept that if the challenge put upon you is to prove P to be the case, in this case you're sticking with God created the universe, I would accept, even if you didn't have you could prove P, so come up with some argumentation that proves P, or alternatively and equivalently prove not P. And that seems to be the effort with a lot of these arguments, is to say, well, I don't know exactly how to argue for P, but I can prove not P, right? That is where not P is my position, and you can argue not P. And I think as a strict logical matter, if you can prove not P, you've successfully proven P. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I think the problem is that there isn't really a strong argument towards proving not P. And maybe that's what sort of motivated you to put the extra lines around it to say, well, look, P or not P, you can't disagree with that. That's obviously true, and so forth.
Yeah, actually, there's not some. I haven't brought this up very often, but you just not stumbled, but you walked right into an area of something that I think is, and I'll say this very carefully, that I think is a potential problem in the tag argument, in the issue of trying to say to an atheist, for example, account for ABC, this certain phenomena. Just because an atheist can't do it doesn't mean that there isn't a possible explanation. And I've said this before. I've said, look, I've talked to 100 atheists, and none of them have been able to give a counter argument or an explanation or whatever it is. It doesn't mean that their position is automatically not true. It only means that of all that we've encountered, none of them have offered anything. And that I have no problem admitting.
Yeah. No, I've seen you work a couple of bugs out of it. Like, I know that there was a period where people would come after you for the first premise, where they say, well, God or not God. And they say, well, what are we talking about here? Are you saying, on the one hand, you're talking about the Christian God, and then the negation of that is there exist no gods? I've seen you be very quick to say, well, no, yeah, that would be a false dichotomy.
Right.
It's either the Christian God exists, the Christian God doesn't exist, or there are some gods, or there are no gods. Either of those things would be proper. So I've seen you, faced with that challenge from atheists, immediately say, no, that's not what I'm arguing. Your second point here is a good one, and this is why I say I don't think that you or anyone else who's employed any sort of a transcendental argument has successfully made the case for not P, regardless of what the P is. And part of the problem is exactly what you identified.
I wouldn't say it's not P. I'd say it's not P.
But no, which is not P? Not P is the no God. You haven't. You would be burdened with trying to prove not P. I mean, if you're trying to prove P, I would accept that you could prove not P, and you're over the goal line. And what I'm saying is that you haven't proven not P, because that would require a very exhaustive examination of everything in the not P space.
Right.
And I think that's part of your point, is that you're aware that you can't say that here would be a bad proof is to say, well, you, my interlocutor, you as an atheist need to tell me the justification for love or math or logic or whatever else. And the fact that you, my interlocutor, are unable to provide that explanation, well, that proves that there is no atheistic account of such a thing. And you know better than that. That's something yeah. I do encounter occasionally in my travels on the internet, I do encounter a more naive debater who will actually hold that position, that since the person they're speaking with fails, it doesn't work. It has to be an exhaustive treatment.
Yeah, what
and
I
the
have
problem
said, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the problem is that how would you come up with an exhaustive treatment of everything in the not P space, right? Like we'll call the P space, meaning all of the beliefs that are related to the Christian God. How would you come up with an exhaustive one to say that there's simply nothing in the not P world that would account for these things?
That's it's one of the things I've been thinking about, and in my spare time, which I don't have too much of, and I'm suspecting that the way to go about it would be to categorize. That there can only be a certain amount of and I don't even know if this is correct. I'm just thinking through this. It would have to be that we have a generalization of categories. For example, the laws of logic are properties. The laws of logic are physical. The laws of logic are abstractions. There's only so many things we could offer as possibilities, and I don't know if we could exhaust those possibilities logically, but I think that we could come up with a set of possibilities that are pretty exhaustive. But I'm careful when I say pretty exhaustive, because it doesn't mean they are exhaustive. There's always could be something else we're not even aware of. In 100 years, you could think of something else, and so that's the problem with the argument. I do think it's a problem. What I would say is that if we've if we've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of atheists, and then we find out that no new argument comes up, we find out that they're repeating themselves, we're finding out that they are continually shooting themselves in the foot logically, and then we see after a while it has been nothing new. It doesn't mean that there isn't a definitive answer out there. And I've said this before. I've said it doesn't prove, but I'm trying to show you is that your position fails repeatedly here. And if an atheist, for example, were to say, well, just because 9 out of 9 times it's failed, we can't have an answer, doesn't mean there's another one out there. And then what they're doing is offering an issue of faith, and then they complain with the Christians, and then it's kind of then it just becomes elocution, and who's going to say what better. But I understand what you're saying. I still think it's a good argument, because we can, and here's the thing, it might be, but I've thought about this too, it might be a better approach to say that God can provide the necessary preconditions for intelligibility in the transcendentals. I think that might even be a stronger way. I've been thinking about that too, and I've been thinking of ways to maybe shift towards that and say, here's that, but we can't have that be true and also the other side be true.
Yeah. Well, on your first point, I would accept that if a person were to downshift the tag from claiming it's a deductive argument and say, well, look, inductively, I've talked to a lot of people out there and I've just never gotten a satisfactory explanation from atheists for these things.
That's a fallacy.
Well, no, not if you say if it's deductive. If you say it's if you claim it's inductive. If you say it's inductive, where you say like you have to acknowledge the possibility. Well, maybe there's somebody who does know the answer you haven't spoken with, or maybe like you say 100 years in the future. You have to, and this is the problem with trying to prove not P, is that you have to anticipate everything in that not P space,
right?
And not even things that are out there you don't know, but things that people haven't even conceived of or will never conceive of. And so it's from a logician's point of view, when you try to structure that as a deductive argument, it's a tall order. That's a big ask. But to say that inductively that like is there an elephant in my house right now? And I've looked pretty much all over my house, and I think even a medium-sized elephant would have caught my attention. Remember that to say that you have a belief that is justified doesn't mean that it has to be a rock-solid, deductively proven thing.
Right.
It just has to have some justification, evidence where
Right.
you ought to have found it, that sort of thing.
Right.
And if you at least find atheist explanations for the universe, or accounts for the universe, unsatisfying, no matter how many of them you poll, that grants some justification, at least on an inductive basis, for your choice to retain your Christian
Right.
belief.
Right. Induction isn't the proof, but it's a very strong suggester that the theistic position carries more weight.
Yeah, well, that's a problem with induction. It turns out to be a bit of a suggestive, subjective assessment. I mean, because I would obviously take the position that it doesn't matter how many people I talk to, and this is, I talk to people from a diversity of faiths, and they all have sort of a similar story about their interactions with a creator, about their reverence for their holy texts, and yet I can make the same claim that through my searches, I haven't found what apparently you found. And as a matter of fact, that might even, just to raise another point on this too, I find that the whole effort to come up with logical arguments a bit of a strange effort anyway, because I wonder if you were to reflect personally on what it is that put you in a position to where you hold on to your faith, or Andrew, or Matthew 4:19, or you could ask Tim, how many people have said, like one day was an atheist, and then said, they bumped into somebody who said, oh, you don't believe in God? Well, let me give you an important message about your salvation and about your eternal fate. Okay, here goes the message. Premise 1, and then they started going through premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and at conclusion you went, I have to repent my sins. And all the people I've talked to, I've never met a single Christian who listened to a structured logical argument, premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, whatever, however many premises, and heard the conclusion and went, yeah, that's got me convinced. I need to fall to my knees and declare that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. Does that not ring true with you guys?
I've not experienced that like that, right? With somebody, seeing somebody like that. I've come close to it.
I think the most sort of personally compelling ways that people come to faith are related to, and I don't mean this in a dismissive way, but related to more emotional reasons, right? There are people that get to a time in their life, and I've just never met anyone who's swayed by a structured argument with premises.
Except,
I came
well,
to
I was.
by
I wasn't. I didn't have an experience. Matt will talk about an experience that he had that was overpowering, and I wasn't. It was a purely logical thing. It was, I say it's mathematics. Looking at fulfilled prophecy, it is mathematically impossible for those things to be coincidence, the specifics of them.
Yeah,
so
we had.
So sorry, Len.
No, I was just going to say we had a podcast host named Tyler Vella on the show a few weeks ago, and he came to faith as an atheist when his philosophy professor was going through the arguments in favor of Christianity, and when he came to the moral argument, he said this is one of the biggest challenges that the Christian faith has, and he started to really examine the claims of Christianity from that point, and was led to faith by an atheistic philosophy professor when he was a sophomore in college. So I think everybody's experience and how they come to faith is completely different. Sure, there's people who experience some emotional, I don't know. I mean, I think that coming to faith is an emotional thing. You're walking from death to life. You're going from darkness into light, so there is an emotional aspect to that, but it's not necessarily an emotional trauma that leads one to faith, if that's what you happen to be suggesting.
Yeah, I should never say never. Somebody just fall down. I'm getting a terrible echo now too. Yeah, I should never say never. I mean, obviously people come to faith for different reasons, and I mean, I could point to the extreme things like I've met so many people that say, oh, I was addicted to drugs and I was, stealing from my parents, and but that's not every believer, and the ones who tend to really stick with it and enter into apologetics tend not to have such a shocking story about how their life was just in shambles and they just fell apart. So I would say I don't want to ever say never, that there are no such people, but I
Yes,
just
in Matt's case, his life was great. He became a Christian. Then his life went to shambles. See, so no, but I mean, it's a thing where look, and when people make the argument, Hogtie, with that, I express. I mean, I don't know if you know my background, but I mean, I'm Jewish. I was raised to believe that Jesus Christ is Hitler's God. There was no love for Jesus Christ. This is the reason people don't understand. Like, at least my generation, a generation after the Holocaust, you mentioned the name of Christ, and that's like, that's the worst thing you could say. So I wasn't looking for Christ, far from it, it wasn't some emotional thing that I was looking for. And I used to. It's funny because the way you said it is, I actually used to listen to people give their how they became a Christian, and there's a time where I was like, gee, is there something wrong with me? Because it was clearly the logical thing to do. There wasn't any, way around that. In my mind, I'm going, gee, I don't have this big emotional thing. And so you're right. Those are the stories that they're like the gripping stories. But you hear that. I mean, I think many of us would, before we found out the truth of Lance Armstrong, right? We were. It was a compelling. Here's a guy who suffered cancer, and he could come back and win the Tour de France, only to find out he was cheating. But I mean, before we found that out, that's the reason it's like this compelling story that people want to hear. People hear my salvation testimony, it's like, oh, okay, that sounds boring. It's not.
But it's interesting. I will say I wouldn't say really boring. It's something I think I'd be quite happy to talk about with you another time as well. If you want to hang out another time, or I'll come back. I am sort of respectful of the time on the show. You have a full rack, and I'm getting no bites tonight. I'm clearly the worst troll. I've not upset you guys and had you arguing. Do you want to talk about flat Earth? Do you want to? Is there a flat Earther in the room? Let me just say one thing about the emotional thing is, I quite often get asked. So what happened? What went wrong? Like, why did you become an atheist? What was the thing that went wrong in your life that made you shake your fist at the sky and just hate God? And I don't know how to ask you guys, not necessarily you guys personally, but for all your brothers and sisters, like, it's an interesting question, but it presumes that all atheists came to lose their faith that way. And I won't retell the story because I know as much as you guys talk with non-believers, you've heard the story before. But mine is as plain vanilla of a deconversion as yours is for conversion, Andrew. In that, I wanted to believe, I did believe, I saw great benefits in my faith, and then I just got to the nagging sort of, well, wait a minute, this part doesn't make sense. Well, this part doesn't make sense, and it was literally over a period of years before I finally realized, oh, it turns out that I don't really believe this stuff, and I have good reason to not believe it. And there was never a point when I went, well, if there was a God, well, then he wouldn't have let this happen. There's no sort of anger sort of a thing that happened there. So it's, I guess we can always say that, well, I came to it logically.
Yeah.
And I think we always want to believe that we came to things logically.
I think you and I talked about this, but the one clarifying thing that I always have, and this is why I don't approach it like you're saying, Christians that say, well, what was the thing that made you so angry? I have a totally different view because I'm coming to it from what the scriptures say. And remember, I think you know me well enough to know I'm not going to be trying to slam you, Hogtie, but I'm just saying, what God says in the Bible is you were never a Christian. You never had the faith to lose. And that's the thing. I mean, I think that when we start there, it's not that someone lost their faith. It's that they never had it. And if anything, they thought they had a faith. They believed they had a faith. They were trying to live as if they had a faith, and then they stopped pretending.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I was ever pretending. I felt a very sincere and I will say important and helpful relationship, and it was again, not to speak ill of people that do believe. I'm just trying to talk about my own experience with it. Is that I found that I was missing a friend. I had somebody who was always there for me, someone who was always in my corner. When the rest of the world wasn't fair to me, God was fair to me. And when I wasn't fair to me, when I made mistakes, I was still loved and supported. And I realized over the time that I was losing my faith that I was losing that very, very valuable friend. I always find it weird when you guys say, well, you didn't really believe. You sort of pretended to believe, or you were maybe deceived into believing it. And I have a suspicion about that. I suspect that you guys are afraid of, like right now, you know that you could never lose your faith. There's nothing I can say or do. There's nothing that's going to happen to you on your drive home from work one day that's going to make you go, oh, wait a minute, there is no God. This whole Jesus thing is a fib. That's not going to happen. You're sure of it. But to whatever extent you're unsure, it's frightening for you to think that you're going to lose this friend, lose this relationship.
No.
And as a result, what you do is you say of other people, you say, oh, well, that person used to believe like I believe, and then now they don't believe?
No,
well, that just can't happen.
Let me clarify, because I don't want you to think that I was in meaning it as an insult. I don't think you did. Well, I mean, you might have, but I don't want anyone else to think it. You know, when I say people stop pretending, so I'm basing this. God says in 1 John 2:19, they went out from among us because they were never of us. They went out to show that they were never of us. So that is saying that when people walk away from the faith, they're exposing that they never had the faith. They thought they did. And I'm not saying that you didn't have a legitimate thinking that I think I'm a Christian. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you thought you had the faith that God says you never had. And
it's not an issue of fear on our side. It's an issue of theological revelation. That's what God says. That there appear to be people who are saved, but they never really were saved. And then we just go with what it says. It's not an issue of fearing at all.
I'll grant you have scriptural support for it. I wouldn't argue that point. Well, I guess maybe this will be one of those things we agree to disagree on, and even if you can say that you guys individually are free from that fear, I've just encountered so many believers that once they find out that you're an atheist and they realize, oh, wait a minute, and not even so much me, because I also would not ever claim to be an evangelical or born again Christian, but when they meet people that were Bible thumpers, as to borrow the name of the show, that they just were right into it, and then after a period of time they came out and said, no, actually, I guess don't really believe. I think that at least amongst your brothers and sisters, you can deny it, and I won't try to claim what's in your head, although you're doing that for me. But I've met a lot of believers that are really fearful of losing their faith, and I think that's part of the defense mechanism, is to say, oh, well, there's a person who had faith and lost it. That's not possible. That can't happen. They must not have really had real faith.
Sure, you're talking on a different level. There are a lot of Christians who've got bad ideas and bad this and bad that, and they're worried for wrong reasons. What we're giving you the answer is, biblically it says such and such. Since we're biblically based, we're saying we must conclude that, and that's what it is. In fact, I've talked to many atheists who say they were Christians. I said, well, what brought you out? What caused you to leave? And then the answers they've given me, in my opinion, have never been very substantial, but have always had problems with the reasoning that have brought them out.
Yeah. Well, I could give you my answers for what let me go out a bit and then sort of pulled me back in places, but I've taken up so much of your time tonight.
Well, okay,
and
so
we haven't got into a good argument.
I do want to clarify one thing, because I don't want it, at least you, or maybe listeners, to get the idea. I'm not. When you said that I was trying to say what's inside your mind, I'm not the one saying that, right? I'm approaching as this is what the Bible says, right? And so. But
you're saying it though.
Well, I'm saying that's what God says. God said.
You're citing your source, yeah.
Yeah, I'm citing the source, so it's not me. This is what God is saying. Anyone who leaves and walks away only exposes that they didn't believe. Now, I'm not. I'm trying to be really clear, because I don't want there to be this idea that I'm trying to say what's in your mind. You know.
Well, I get that, but I'm also not going to let you get away, Andrew, with trying to distance yourself from that statement. Not this isn't one of the worst ones. Let me give a different example. But when somebody says to me, "Oh, that's not me saying it. That's the Bible saying it," what I hear from you, Andrew, is that is you saying it, and you're citing your source. You have scriptural support for what you're saying. But
no,
I can tell you that the Bible says something, and then tell you I disagree with it. So, I mean, Andrew, you're in the position right now of saying either, well, the Bible says that these people didn't really believe, and I agree with that, or you're saying, well, the Bible says that, but the Bible's got that wrong. Or maybe you're saying you don't know if the Bible's right or wrong.
No, but
so don't allow yourself to distance yourself from the claim that you're putting forward just because you're able to cite a source.
Well,
and there's a reason why I mentioned that. If you're wondering why I'm going to harp on that point, I can tell you why I think it's relevant.
It almost sounds as if you're telling me what I'm thinking.
No, I'm telling you, there's one of three things. Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why that's relevant.
Let me explain it real quick. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So remember, I mean, understand my position. The Bible can't be wrong because of its source. Who wrote it? God wrote it. Therefore, it can't be wrong. So citing an absolute source and saying this is what God says, and to give a further example is, if you have an ambassador who speaks on behalf of the president, okay, when he's speaking, it's the president speaking. When he's acting in the role of ambassador, okay, if I'm giving you the message of another person, in this case God, and I'm saying this is what he's saying, my agreeing or disagreeing has no bearing on it. That's what he says.
I want to tell you the reason why I sort of harp on this issue.
Okay.
And also to sort of pick at this example of the president. Well, I mean, suppose that the president tells the spokesman, when they do those little press conferences, says, go out there, meet the press, and tell them this and this and this. You make sure those three things get out there. And that person says, well, Mr. President, with all due respect, I don't think that second thing, I don't think that's something we should tell him. I think that's going to cause more of a problem. And the president says, okay, thanks, your opinion's so noted, but I don't care. You go out and say that. That speaker can still go out and speak on behalf of the president while he disagrees with it. And what I'm saying is, Andrew, you can't play that card and say, well, maybe I agree with it, maybe I don't, when in the previous breath you said, I believe the Bible is right. So
well, I do.
You agree with it. Of course.
No, I'm not trying to separate myself. I'm just saying this is what God says. Now, do I agree with it? Whether I like it or not doesn't matter. What I am saying is it's God's word, and if he said it, therefore it's absolutely true, and therefore it's his word.
I'll tell you, in this case, I think it's pretty benign what you're saying. I'm not really upset about it. Can I tell you the reason why I sort of harp on it?
I think we should move on. Honestly, we've been on for a while, and we got a lot.
And I'm trying to excuse myself like 4 times too.
Yeah, I know.
Well, can I make this one point though, real quick, Matthew? Then?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'd called you Matthew now. I hadn't done that for a while. Kevin Swanson, there's a video clip of Kevin Swanson going around where he's waving the Bible and he's saying that gays should be put to death. Now, he does say that gays should be given the opportunity to convert to Christianity first, repent their sins and their lifestyle.
Really?
But he says they should be put to death. And as he's waving the Bible, he says, this isn't me saying this. This is God's word saying this. And this is a problem I have, is that when somebody comes out and says, well, I'm giving you this terrible, odious opinion that we should go out and start killing these people. But it's not me. Well, clearly he agrees with it. Now, I think that you guys wouldn't agree with it, and I think you would also disagree with his interpretation of what the Bible says.
That's kind of interesting.
But I'm saying I kind of jump on that when people distance themselves.
Could you send me that video? I mean,
are you talking about Steve Anderson or some goofball?
Kevin Swanson. He hosted
He's very well known in the homeschool circles.
Oh,
I've been on his radio show before, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll send you the clip, and hopefully I didn't misrepresent it, because you'll be on my case what you should be. But my point is, I just try to, when a Christian says, well, this isn't me saying it, it's the Bible saying it. It's not you. It is you and the Bible saying it. I appreciate when you cite your source for your beliefs, but I just, like I say, I don't like when people distance themselves by saying, oh, it's not me, it's the Bible. But anyway,
I'm trying to find out how to give you my contact information privately. I'm looking on your G+ page.
I think we had it. I'll know how to find you. I think I've
I'll tell you what. Just go to strivingforeternity.org. There's a contact page, and just say, hey, get this to Andrew.
All right. So Andrew, we're going to accept Len's advice and move along. Well, thanks, guys. I always appreciate you letting me have a little bit of airtime on the show. And
wait a minute. We haven't ejected you.
Oh, do you want me to start swearing? Is that what gets people thrown out?
No, just you did.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Just couldn't help him. Who's next in line here?
I don't know if Jason wants. Jason has some pretty good. Jason Molletta. I mentioned him earlier, and I think it'd be neat to have him and Matt dialogue a little bit on the. I don't have enough faith. I lack faith in God argument. He and Matt both have an argument on that, and it might be a neat exchange. However, Chris Mowdy is in the house. Just saying.
Chris is gonna have to wait.
Hey, Matt Slick, do you see Len's cool bookshelf behind him there? His library, his massive library there.
Yeah, it's pretty wimpy.
My own.
Look, he's got 3 books in one right there. The Trinity.
Yeah.
I don't see the influence up there. Do you, Matt?
Yeah, because he's a heretic.
That's on
What's
my
that?
That's on my wife's bookshelf.
Does she like it?
She liked it a lot. She read that book. Well, let's see.
You sent him a copy, and not me?
No, I bought the book for her off of Amazon like 6 years ago. There was a radio show talking about it when I can't remember if it was Brandon House or Wretched or some podcast.
Live with Matt Slick.
I was talking. No, I wasn't. I had no idea who Matt Slick was at the time. I had no clue about Karm or anything at that time. I was just like getting into evangelism. It was really before I really understood apologetics at all. So, but yeah, my wife liked the book a lot.
Good.
She said it was better than The Shack. So there's the endorsement.
That is not saying much. Yeah.
Let's get that one up on the Amazon reviews.
This is better than Shack. Oh.
I like this better than The Shack.
Thanks. Oh, man.
Not quite inspired, but better.
Tell her thank you. Better than The Shack.
Yeah, she had actually just read The Shack. It was funny. She was part of a woman's book club.
Oh, no. They went through it.
Well, they were non-Christians. She was the only Christian in the group, and they were like, oh, this book... And so my wife was the only one who was like, this isn't biblical. Well, all of this stuff, because it's a compelling story, whatever. You know, my wife read it, and before she was saved, and she really was compelled by the story and everything. And but then once she got saved, she realized, obviously, you know, God is not a black woman named Papa. So, and the Holy Spirit is not an Asian person or whatever. So, so yeah, she kind of had the opportunity to stand for truth at that level that she was at, you know, probably a year into her faith or something. So, yeah, but anyhow, I digress. So let's add someone else to the call. Jason, you in the lottery. You're in. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Look at that. He's got a microphone and everything. Are you a podcast guy or a YouTube guy or what? You got to unmute yourself, Jason.
Obviously, Len wasn't listening when I was talking about Jason. You got to unmute yourself. But he has a podcast called Logical Belief.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew's mentioned it before, I believe. So yeah, I did a
library than you, Len. Just saying.
Dude, you look like Russell Crowe.
Are you friends with Tyler?
That is hilarious. I get that all the time. I think that's ridiculous. My wife thinks
look like Russell Crowe.
Ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous too, but I get that at checkout stands and all kinds of things.
He looks like a chubby Will Wheaton.
Checkout stands. Wait a minute.
Like a chubby Russell Crowe.
Yeah, Will Wheaton.
It's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. My wife thinks it is too, but I think Andrew was referencing. I did a podcast recently on is the atheist claim, and I noticed Christopher wrote here in the chat that lack theism is jive. is Christopher is he a lack theist? I'm not sure if he is or not.
He would be probably a weaker atheist or an agnostic.
Okay.
But one of the more honest ones you end up having dialogues with.
Yeah, actually, I've had dialogues with Christopher on the Bible Thumping Wingnut, and he's been one of the best atheists to actually have a dialogue with. So I don't know if you remember me, Christopher, but
So you had a podcast where you did on the lack of belief argument, and Matt has an article on that as well, and I think it might be neat for both of you to go back and forth and explain the views you have on this idea that, well, I lack belief in God. Might be educational for folks.
Yeah, let's hear yours.
Well, I mean, the way that I look at it is I think the atheist is making a category error, because to lack belief is we only lack belief in concepts of which we are unaware or we are ignorant of. So when a Christian presents the concept of God, the atheist is no longer ignorant of the concept. So to then claim that he lacks a belief, we always make judgments. The moment that we are presented with whatever concept, we are then faced with making a judgment. Are we going to either believe this or are we going to not believe it? And so when the atheist claims that he simply lacks belief, he's making, I think, a category error. He's placing, because the Christian is very willing to give him a concept of God, of which then he can make a judgment on whether he believes this particular concept or not. But to say that he lacks belief is to say that he's ignorant of the concept. So I think he's making a category error.
I said the same thing in my article. Don't know if I use the word category error, but when you are facing an issue, you do something with it. You categorize it. You affirm, you deny, or you wait to affirm or deny. But either one of those is a category. You've done something with it. So to say you lack belief, and I've said this exact same thing. I'm looking at my article. You lack belief in something you're not aware of. So I'll use an illustration. I'm thinking of a concept in my mind. Do you believe it or not believe it? And they say, well, I don't know. What is it? I go, I'm not telling you yet. Now that's their state of lacking a belief. And then I say, well, there's an ice cream factory in the 4th largest moon of Jupiter. Now, do you believe it or disbelieve it? And they make a judgment. Well, I'm going to hope with. And then if they're smart, they'll go, "Why lack belief that it exists?" And I start laughing because you know what they're trying to do. They're trying to cover their tracks. But yeah, it's the same kind of a thing. I think lack of belief is an admission on the atheist part that they don't have an intellectual defensible position, and they have to go to a place which essentially is a non-position.
Yeah.
If you think about it, a lack of something isn't anything. So their position is, I don't have a position. I don't have a position, and my position is to also not have any position about it.
Well, and I think it's disingenuous because, and this is one thing I pointed out, is that to say that you are an atheist means that you do not have a belief in God. Well, that's not a lack of belief. That is a belief.
Yeah.
So I had formed it in the form of a syllogism. I had said that we cannot act upon concepts of which we have a lack of belief.
Exactly correct.
Atheists act upon their claim lack of belief. They act upon it. They join Bible thumping wingnut podcasts and episodes, and they argue about it.
Right.
So therefore, atheists do not have a lack of belief.
Well, what I'll also say is, I try and test them and say, look, you lack belief, yes. Okay, well, I'll just say, something, the Bible says God exists, therefore God exists. And they say, you can't say that. I say, why not? Because it doesn't mean that God exists. Let's say, wait a minute, I thought you lacked belief. If you have a lack of belief, why are you arguing against the position? If it's just an intellectual exercise, well, let's talk about that. But really what's happening is, by their actions, they demonstrate what they really hold to. And then they rejoice when, so to speak, an argument for God isn't proven or whatever it might be. They try and they have a good time about it. So they're just revealing to us what the real position is. They deny God's existence.
Well, and to rejoice that the theistic argument failed is an action. So they're acting upon their belief again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a vacuous kind of a position. And of course, if lack of belief is the definition of atheist, then my cat is an atheist.
Yeah.
And they'll go, "Man, that's dumb." I say, "Well, no, it's not. That's just your definition." And they'll say, "No, I don't mean it that way." Well, how do you mean it? You're the one who said it.
We know that can't be true because your cat is actually Hitler. And
no, we have 3 cats. One is Hitler. He looks like Hitler. And we call him Hitler, but his real name is Obadiah. And then we have right next to me here, we have Finney. He's an orange cat, Finney. And then we have another cat called Luther. So they're obviously all theists.
He does have a cat that looks like Hitler. I'm just saying, I can't look at that thing.
I can go get him and show you because he is like, he has a little mustache and a hair part. And I went down one night a few months ago downstairs, middle of the night, and I saw him with the other 2 cats going, meow, meow. And so we knew something was up.
Was he lifting his paw up like
that? Yeah,
this?
he was meow, meow. And then the other cats were sitting there. It was weird.
They've been in the Slick household too long. Of course it's weird.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I think one of the things, jumping back to the claim lack of belief, is the atheist likes to be in a position where, I noticed a lot of times when, we have, and just my personal discussions with atheists, when it comes to actually discussing God, they want to argue about the perimeter issues when actually getting to the fundamental hard issue of the atheist objection to God as a moral thing, and so they want to talk about periphery issues, and so they'll argue for a whole hour with you, that they actually do lack a belief.
Yes.
But,
yes, they do.
but
it's funny.
But and they'll stand on that, but it's just, I think it's just running for the tall grass. I think they're just trying to get
they're dodging.
It's dodging.
Dodge.
It's dodging.
Well,
that's exactly what it is.
So it's funny how you bring it up, because that's one of the things I always find interesting is they want to talk about origins, just not the origin, right? I mean, it's like, let's talk about the origins of life, starting with life already existing, or the origins of the universe with the universe already existing. And we even had, Matt and I had someone on that was like, well, we can't go back before the universe began because we can't know what happened then. So we're just going to start with it having existed. That's right, because there's no way to explain those things.
I remember that that particular guy. I'd listened to that episode where he actually said that we can't. I think he told you, Matt, that we can't actually know if the laws of logic pre-existed the universe. Well, if they didn't pre-exist the universe, that means they're a property of the universe.
Exactly correct.
Which means that once again measure
properties are measurable.
Exactly, you could measure properties, and so it's refuted based upon. I mean, it's not a part of the universe.
Yeah, that's really simple.
And the universe could not have both existed and not existed at the same time. So it's an invalid statement to say that we don't know if the laws of logic preceded the universe. Yes, we actually do. We do know that.
Yeah, otherwise they're properties of the universe. You can't have that. Absolutely correct. That's why I say in the tag argument, the categories of explanation in support of the transcendentals routinely fall apart. I don't know if there are any categories left. That doesn't mean there aren't any. But this is one of the things. It's, they'll say, well, it's a property of the universe. And you're exactly right. It doesn't work. And I think that's one of the things that really can negate the idea of their position being the case, because it's either part of the universe or not part of the universe, dependent upon the universe or not dependent upon the universe. And we can show that it's not. Therefore, it's not dependent on the physical. It's got to be dependent on something else. That really narrows the field down substantially.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
by the way, what's your name? Logical Belief Ministries? What? Jason.
Jason, yeah.
Dude, you got an obvious problem, and I can see it. Your books are all too nice and tidy. Your pictures behind you are all too perfectly leveled. There's no dust on your desk. You got some emotional problems.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
The funny thing is, if you actually saw this room, you would recognize that this is just there's a mattress leaning up against the wall.
Okay.
There is a ironing board there leaning up against the mattress. It's just a spare bedroom that we have. So the corner looks good. Right. I'll say that the corner looks good. So.
Okay, there's hope for you then, because I was making sure.
When he says that, consider the source.
Yeah,
that's true. My office is always a mess. Even when I clean it up to the level of just messy. So yeah.
There's nothing wrong with organized books. Just saying.
That's right. You should see my library. I mean, I got books all over the place.
Your library.
Jeez, I got stuff all over the place.
I've even seen the things you hide behind the books.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. Look at here. If you guys can see, that's one of my bookshelves right there. Look at that mess.
Wait, now go across so people can see how you have them over the window.
Yeah. See over the window. See.
See, this is what people do. Hold on, let me make sure you're presenting. So this is what people do when they run out of book space. Okay, they have to get creative, and over the window will be shelves.
Yeah, over the window. Yeah, so and I've got boxes in the garage, and I've given boxes away, and I've thrown boxes away. At any rate.
Really? Why? Why didn't you give me some?
Telling those things
ship them my way.
Tons of them.
Oh, I give
obviously, Len needs some. If you look in his
that's embarrassing, man.
Pathetic.
That is Yeah. Oh, that's pathetic.
I mean, look at that. Look at this library he's got there. You know.
What you could do, Len, you could just come back and say, at least I've read them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know,
I can say the same thing.
You know,
Actually, that's a Spurgeon sermon set. Is that what you got there, Len, at the top?
correctamundo. Yeah. I have.
He was okay.
I have a decent library. Look, you know, I put my focus on one volume containing 66 books, and I don't hear any of these ding-dongs boasting in that. So
Wow.
that's all I'm going to say about that.
Wow.
So, any hoot, should we add Christopher Mowdy to the call, or who is this VC whatchamacallit guy?
I don't know who VC is, but
Let's add him.
you can never go wrong adding Christopher Mowdy.
That's true, and he could actually behave himself if we brought in him with someone else. So, but let's. Okay, so VC, whoever you are, I have brought you into the broadcast. You need to unmute your microphone, and you can speak freely until I decide to boot you. Still thinking how to word your question. All right. Well,
I'd actually like to ask Christopher the question. Can we ask him about the lack? Is he one that claims lack of belief?
okay. Christopher is in the broadcast. You can unmute your mic and you can talk about lack theism. And I'm gonna go finish putting my kids to bed.
Check 1 2. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Look how manly you look with
look at that. He's trying to look like Len with the beard and stuff.
Caveman beard balm. Can't go wrong.
Obviously, the girlfriend likes the beard.
You know, I need to look a little bit more hirsute to prove my manliness.
Okay, so Mr. Matty, are we going to see you? Are we going to see you in Ohio Fire?
My conference for work is in April. You said it's in April, didn't you?
Second weekend in April, April 8th and 9th.
Oh, well, that makes okay. It's a possibility.
I mean, excuse to see the girlfriend, and then let me get the date. I'll get the date for that other conference that we have in Ohio is the 24th. Sorry, 23rd.
Which one's Columbus?
Columbus is the 8th and 9th.
Ah, that makes it a little bit easier. All right, yeah. Let me consider that with the lady, because I have a conference in Florida. Poor me, for work. Bonita Springs, April 24th to the 28th.
Okay.
So I might be able to work that out.
Okay, so I lack a belief in Chris Mowdy. Just saying.
Oh, really? So
yeah, I lack a belief that
you're just shifting the burden of proof that I actually exist.
No, I'm shifting the burden of proof on I actually until we have dinner. I don't believe it's going to happen. So I lack a belief.
We already had appetizers. I just refuse to give you dinner.
So what do you think about the argument? You were calling it lack theism, which is kind of neat, and you're saying it's drive. So what do you think about the conversation?
Lack theism, as I understand it, is kind of a rhetorical move made by atheists who are lazy and don't want to think, and it is a way of shifting the burden away from them, because if they make a positive claim, at least if they're smart enough to understand that when they make a positive claim that they need to have justifications for it to be a warranted belief, by just saying that they lack it. Oh, and there are some people who are going to go so far as to say that that lack of belief should be a redefinition of what atheism is, and I'll even name names. Bionic Dance. If anybody's familiar with Bionic Dance, she's a YouTube personality that has, on an interview that she had with me, as well as a hang that she had on the New Covenant Group channel, pretty much said that if only everybody would just get on board with this definition of atheism as it being a lack of belief, we'd all be good. And then it was presented to her like a chair lacks belief in God. It has no... a rock, a cat, and then we literally would say, like, so are you saying that a chair, rock, and a cat are atheists? And she, without skipping a beat, said, yes! Oh yeah, face palm to the nth degree. So it's difficult to kind of work around that I do think that it's lazy. I do think that it's more of a rhetorical move as a way of shifting the burden of justification. And I think that it's lazy atheism.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is and we use the term Delahuntty dodge, but it's a form of dodging the issue. It is an attempt to try to put the burden on the Christian to have to defend for something that the person doesn't want to have to answer for.
And also, that's why I think it's a rhetorical move. It has less to do with engaging in a discussion about why you think what you think, and understanding why somebody else thinks the way that they think in a form of understanding, and more of, well, I'm going to try to put you on your heels. Well, I'm going to try to put you on your heels. Well, why that? No, okay, now I'm asking all the questions. You need to give me all the answers. And I don't think that that's constructive.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. I mean, as an atheist, once again, for people that have no idea who I am an atheist.
A professing atheist.
Oh, you are such a mess with this. For the same reasons why Bionic Dan's wanting to change the definition of atheism to mean lacktheism, you and I disagree about
how would you define
atheism is.
How would you define atheism then?
Atheism is a belief that there isn't a God.
It's a positive affirmation.
It's a positive belief. I agree.
Yeah, I think that's revealed in the actions of atheists too.
How so?
Well, they will defend the position that there can be no God, or that theistic arguments are invalid, or whatever it is. We behave based on what we believe, not what we don't believe, or what we have lack of belief in. Our actions are motivated out of intentions. Intentions come out of beliefs and things like that.
Yeah, but I also
at least you're intellectually. I'm not saying other ones are liars, but I think you're, let's just say, more intellectually honest about it.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words. But Matt, I've a question. Matt and Jason, right? Jason, you and I have talked before, right?
We've spoken on the Bible Thumping Wingnut, just in chat.
So a question I have for the two of you is, I try to maintain a clear distinction in the kinds of discussions that can be had. One of them is a discussion about whether X exists. I see, separate from that, a discussion about my beliefs, why I believe that X does or does not exist. I think those are two separate arguments, because one almost is like persuasive, like, well, no, objectively this is true, and because I believe it, you should believe it as well. And another discussion is, here are the reasons why I believe what I believe, in case you were curious, and I'm curious to know why you believe what you believe, especially if you disagree with me. Does that distinction make sense to you guys?
Could you repeat that?
Sure. Yeah. It's a distinction between saying that something objectively does or does not exist, as compared to having a belief that something does or does not exist, and then the discussion being about how you can justify or what warrants those beliefs. One's a discussion about beliefs. One's a discussion about ontological objectivity.
Right.
Well, I think you're confusing a little bit. I think what you're not realizing is we as Christians are not saying that our beliefs we believe are objectively true. We're not making the claim that we just have faith. We don't describe faith that way. As Christians, we actually make a positive claim that the Christian worldview is objectively true. It's just not something that we just believe.
I'll take that on board, but I have to say that from my perspective, when I hear atheists take that attitude, it raises my heckles. When I hear an atheist argue that something doesn't exist, instead of going into reasons why they have a belief that something doesn't exist, I think one is more ham-fisted and one is more sophisticated. The latter being more sophisticated, the former being more ham-fisted.
Could I just do a follow-up question with that then? So are you saying then that your atheism that you particularly hold to, then you're saying that you're not sure that it's actually objectively true?
Oh, I hold out the possibility that a God exists. I just see it as improbable for what I consider reasonable justifications.
Okay, so I would see for me, I would, and I'd like to see what Matt says about this, but I would say that's more of an agnostic, not an atheist.
That's what Andrew wants me to call myself.
Yeah,
That's why I say you only profess to be a.
Well, here's the thing with you, Christopher, is you're a little unusual. You're not an obstreperous twit who's an atheist. You're at least, I think.
You're the first person to say that I'm unusual.
Well, you know, you're honest.
You are the first person to say that I'm not an extemporaneous twit.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm trying to give you kind of not a backhanded compliment, but a compliment nonetheless. You know, in that at least I think you're more honest about things, and that you're willing to deal with stuff, and you don't take things personally. And if we say no, we don't agree with you, you'll talk about it, and that's a good thing to see. So I think you're a little bit freer to face issues than a lot of atheists are. I think a lot of atheists are really emotionally connected to their position, just as a lot of Christians are emotionally connected and can't see things logically, can't discern much. So it's good, but I think Andrew's right that you say there's a possibility that God exists. You're just not convinced by the argumentation, and so you hold this atheistic position. Well, agnosticism is a subdivision of atheism anyway. You're just saying you don't know for sure that he does exist. You're not saying you know for sure he doesn't, and so that's we could blend the arcs of the circles and say, yeah, you're in that area of atheism that's also agnosticism.
Yeah, and I'm happy to take that on board, and the way that Andrew and I usually settle this is I don't care what you call me, so long as when we have a discussion, it's about ideas that I have. So long as it's a discussion between the ideas that I have and the ideas that you have. If you want to call me whatever, a leftist pinko commie or whatever, it's like, okay, I'm a leftist pinko commie. That being said, here's what I believe. What is it that you believe? How do we differ? What do we agree on? And how can we move forward a conversation on that?
Okay, so what would be sufficient to bring you to the faith in Jesus Christ as God in flesh, died on the cross, rose from the dead?
For me, the answer that I give to that is subjective experience. I would have to have a phenomenological experience such that I understood that the interpretation of that experience only be explained as having been touched by the Holy Spirit, and that would shape the way that I frame and perceive things from that point forward. I can't be reasoned into it. I personally don't think that people can be, but that's my take.
I would agree with you. The Bible says that it's not an issue of the mind; it's an issue of the revelatory work of God. Jason and I are both 5-point Calvinists. I'm familiar with that. We believe in God's election, predestination, and He has to open up your heart and your mind. Ultimately, what we're just cutting through all kinds of loads of crap and just getting down to the point. The reason you're not a believer ultimately is because God has not appointed you to be a believer at this point. We don't know if you're ultimately going to be elected or are elect from the foundation of the world to be granted that act of belief or not. It's it's above our pay grade. But that's the ultimate reason. You've not been granted that by God yet. That's what it comes down to.
Could I do a follow-up question, Christopher, on what you said earlier? Because you mentioned...
You can...
you mentioned... Well, I'm going to anyway. So...
I won't answer it.
So you mentioned objective truth. You said something about you don't like it when atheists, and so it seemed like you didn't seem to like it because Christians maybe say that we believe our beliefs are objectively true. My question would be is you seem to have an assumption that there is something like objective truth. Do you believe there is objective truth and that you can actually know it? And then I would ask you a follow-up question on that is how do you know that to be true, that objective truth?
Those are really good questions, and I appreciate the fact that you're listening to me at that level. But I do want to clarify, it's not that I get upset when atheists say that because Christians. I try to take things on a case-by-case basis. A Christian worldview is much more rich and it has a longer history and is based on, like you said, I'm not going to argue with you that you accept your beliefs as being objectively true. I will take that on board, and I will grant that to you. Atheism isn't that. It is the belief that gods don't exist, but it doesn't answer all of those other metaphysical questions from my perspective. It doesn't answer all those other metaphysical questions, and it needs to be supplemented with something, with a more rigorous philosophical theory or worldview, or something like a secular humanism, if you will.
I'd call it a hope.
Okay. I'll buy that for $1.
And the reason I would say that is because I've talked to so many atheists over the years who deny God's existence, and we've talked about the issues of morality as an example. Mm-hmm. And then all kinds of intellectual theories are derived and explicated to demonstrate why we can have moral absolutes or something like it, or moral norms. And we'll get into moral realists, non-moral realists. We'll get into subdivisions of those. And I just would categorize. Yeah, you get some weird stuff, and it's as though that they're hoping that there's some intellectual justification for the enigma that they live in, that there are moral absolutes, but they can't justify them, and so they try and find something else. It's ultimately, in my view, an issue of hope. They're hoping that it can be found. They're hoping that they can rest their intellectual property on that foundation, that it'll stay in place. And I consider it kind of a hope. What's that?
I'm sorry, you were still talking. Finish your last sentence, please.
Yeah, I just think ultimately it's an issue of hope. They don't have any facts, any truths, on which they can rest on these things ultimately, and it's a subjective kind of thing, a hope that they want.
I would agree with that, probably for different reasons than you, but I want to be able to address what you just said, Matt, and also get back to the question that Jason, because he had a follow-up question that I didn't get a chance to.
Sorry about that.
But no, I'd like to address you first, because that's more fresh on my mind. And I know the answer I want to give to Jason. I agree with you, but probably for different reasons. And the reasons that I have are, yes, humans are hopeful for the things that we don't understand, and morality is something that we don't understand because it's embedded within consciousness, which is not very well understood from a secular perspective. So for those of us with a secular perspective, we have to admit intellectual integrity by saying we don't know how it all works. So yes, we are hopeful that there will be an answer one day. The answers that are available to us change over time, and it incorporates all those weird things that you talked about, including moral nihilism. I have to admit that for some reason I'm charmed by that lately. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, moral realism as compared to what's the opposite of moral relativism, and all that stuff. So I agree with you that it is hope, but I think that the hope is born out of just a compulsion of human thought and behavior. When you don't know something, you hope that there will be an answer to that thing that you don't know. Getting back to Jason's follow-up question. You're going to have to remind me of it, Jason. The one was do I believe that objective reality exists?
Mm-hmm. Right,
that was the initial question.
Yeah, and then I was going to ask you to, if you do, to then how do you justify that from your subjectivity?
Okay. I accept that there is objective reality, and I take it as a basal assumption that philosophically doesn't need justification. It's somewhat axiomatic.
Okay, so would you accept it if I said that it's true that God exists because it's axiomatic?
For you, yes.
Okay.
That's subjective, not axiomatic.
What's that?
That's subjective, not axiomatic, if it's true for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Once again, I'm not talking about the objective reality of something existing. I'm talking about what is axiomatic that I build my justification upon. So you can take different things. I'll even call it an assumption. It is an assumption of mine that objective reality exists. So if we want to obviate the use of the term axiomatic.
Would you concur that you have to have that assumption in order to actually function within reality?
That there's an objective reality. Yeah, unless you wanted to present a case for hard solipsism, which I can't, or nor do I want.
I mean, interject. I don't think people have to know that or believe there's objective reality in order to operate. People all the time don't operate consistently with logic and things. They can work inconsistently.
Well, my argument
I understand this question as like day-to-day processes, like stopping at a red light, going at a green light, trusting that people who have the red light will stop as well when your light is green, and simple things like that. So objectively, I think that there are things outside of my skin, and my senses and reasons interpret them, and there is a consistency across the human minds that I accept that exist, that are objectively real, and we all exist on a planet that is one of many planets around the sun, that is part of a solar system, that is part of many solar systems in the universe, and all of that stuff. That makes sense to me. Now, the abstracted things don't matter whether, you know, I stop at a red light or go at a green light. I was talking about the more local part of my explanation. That's how I understood Jason's question.
Well, I see a distinction between a claim and a belief. You know, you can make the claim that you don't believe objective reality exists, but my point is you can't actually believe that because you couldn't function within reality from that particular belief. So it's simply a claim. So I think that when you say that you assume objective reality exists, I think that yeah, you do. You do have to assume that because you can't function within God's reality without that assumption. And I don't believe from the Christian worldview that you can actually justify that assumption. And as you agree, it's an assumption on your part. I believe that that particular assumption is justified within the Christian worldview. I believe that you're holding to it. You're holding to that assumption. You, in fact, are claiming that you have it. But I don't think, as you admit it, it is an assumption on your part. So it's just something that you have to assume, but you can't give any justification for it.
You're right, and I'm okay with that.
Are you? I wanted to ask you a question. I recently, one time, I was actually listening to Matt Slick. I was listening to your one of your podcasts, and you had somebody call in, some woman, that said that she was an epistemological nihilist, and I thought that was kind of an oxymoron. Seems like a self-refuting. Seems like two contradictory statements. So I didn't know. You mentioned nihilism yourself. I didn't know. Are you an epistemological nihilist?
You're not asking me that, are you?
No, I'm asking Christopher because he
okay, I'm like, what? Okay.
No, I'm not asking. It's just I thought it was funny, the lady that called in, and so he just mentioned he's been entertaining nihilism, I think.
Yeah, I was kind of intrigued by that statement too.
I was intrigued by the statement.
Hold
so
on.
I wanted to ask you if you're an epistemological nihilist.
And Christopher, before you answer that question,
are you going to talk about Van Hagar?
No, that's a different conversation. We don't have enough time. I just want to let everyone know that I'm going to end the broadcast on YouTube here, but the conversation will continue if you go to mixlr.com, mixlr.com/BibleThumpingWingnut. You can still hear the audio. It's being broadcast live over there, and there is live chat that you can participate in. I say that because there's 54 viewers currently, and if the conversation interests you, you can still go and hear it and interact with one another over there in live chat. And I believe the link is in the description of the Hangout here. But I have to go, because I'm home alone with my children, and I've got to get my daughter ready for bed, and I may pop back in here, but as for the broadcast part, I have to end it here. So thanks for watching, everybody. Go to BibleThumpingWingnut.com, check us out, join our Facebook group, follow us on Twitter, and with that, we are out of here.